Welcome to the Ramble. I'm your learner Glithy, and today we are truly rambling. I have some actual stuff and like my progress and stuff, but also I have some thoughts that I just want to get out. So let's talk about it. So first off, of course, is going to be our lovely "How's my Japanese going?" And I would say this week was pretty successful. I did a lot of things around uh, of course, Migaku and Bunpro, but also working on my listening and my reading. Um, I think that I I decided to take it easy, so sticking around reading and listening to N4 stuff, which is, I will be honest, too easy, but it was a good way to get back into it. Um, and starting next week, we'll go back to N3 stuff, which is a little bit harder, but is honestly where I should be working my way through. Um, I think the reason I took it easy is just I was really like super sick and then super lazy. Like I won't even lie, super lazy. And that caused me a little bit of an issue with catching back up. Uh, I don't know, something about that first couple of days after being sick just makes you really want to do nothing. But more importantly is right looking forward. So like I said, I'm going to dive more deeply into N3. My goal is to completely finish N3 by the end of this year. And what that means is getting through the grammar, adding new words, and essentially, sorry about that, getting more reading and listening done. Um, this week was a little bit of an easier week because I didn't have work. Yay, vacations. But next week I head back into actual work, and so we're gonna have to balance that instead of being lazy and taking all day to do it. Another thing is, of course, putting everything in the way that I have it set up. So my morning is generally get up, do like, those things, and then journal, Japanese, exercise, and eat. And I think that's a fairly good schedule. I do like mess with it sometimes, like move the order or something, but that's mostly just, I don't know, for fun, I guess, or for flavor. Maybe I get a little bored, but those are the big things there. But essentially, what I'm doing this for the rest of this month is doing kind of what's a good way? Uh, kind of a little ways of just trying to get myself back into studying and like not necessarily, you know, making it new or exciting, but just kind of, I don't know, I guess you'd call it like the middle slump or the intermediate plateau, that kind of thing, trying to work my way through that. And so what I want to do is like especially focus on the SRS, but also try to incorporate fun things. So this past week I was like listening to Kinsen no Kaeri, which is yeah, a good thing to listen to. Um Next week I'll probably reincorporate bite-sized Japanese, which is a little bit harder, and maybe Japanese with Noriko or something like that, which is also kind of that in 3 native listening level. I thought about incorporating some more anime back into my life. Uh, as we know, I'm watching One Piece slowly but surely. And maybe I will add in some more, particularly slice of life animes. Like One Piece is fun for me to watch because it's silly and it's shonen, but it also is, right, not necessarily the most natural Japanese. It is very much anime Japanese. And so that's something I have to be careful with when I'm like picking up new words is not necessarily is the word normal, but is the conjugation like rude? Because I think that's like the thing. It's like, right, Luffy talks very bluntly. I believe Zoro does too. Sanji's a little bit over the top. Nami is, I think, Nami and Usopp might be the closest to like not being super anime Japanese, but still. And I could be wrong. Like I'm only in early days when like early days I say is I'm like through I don't know the first half of what's up. But still, that is the concern there. And then I guess the last thing for Japanese is that I do have like my read real Japanese, which is more natural's not the word. Uh, yeah, natural written Japanese is what it is. It's N3 level focused, and I do have like a reading training book that I've been like kind of half-ass going through, which I should like focus up more. Because the thing about being like a learner is you unfortunately collect a lot of materials and you should use them. Or as you might have seen people who go from app to app to app and what is it? Training plan to training plan. I'm trying so hard not to do that. But I think I'm pretty safe sticking with Boon Pro and Migaku. So there's that. Then transitioning into well, yeah, let's transition into like my exercise and weight and stuff. So I want to rant for just a moment. I think I didn't actually talk about this because of like I'm not sponsored. I'm never gonna be sponsored by anyone. This is obviously like a thing. But I mentioned that I was using like meal replacement, and that meal replacement is Huel. Um, and I just want to rant a bit because I live in Japan, and they decided to change things, but only for like the Black Edition, and it's just downright annoying. Basically, they decided to like shrink the size and like produce it in Japan, which sounds like right one good point, but one kind of inchitification point. Like let's make it smaller and basically more expensive. And I was gonna eat that. Like sometimes that happens. That's the unfortunate nature of capitalism, especially what we live in right now. But then they, I don't know, they did a thing. And basically, what the thing is they may have, I guess, overestimated what this would do. And so, long story short, the Black Edition is basically out of stock until October. And trust me, I checked. I like talked to pseudo customer service. And I wish I had known that because I could have done like the weird like prepper thing and like bought extra bags or some shit. But basically, I switched to white edition for now, which isn't necessarily a problem. It's more that my issue is just like transparency and actually doing your shit right. They should have, I don't know, anticipated that there would be issues and maybe considered, I don't know, still internationally shipping product until they had a sure switch over to the Japanese factories. But I'm talking things that might make sense, so let me just get off of that because that was probably expensive or something. Rant over. So I'm sorry about that for anyone who stuck around that long. But in my actual exercise stuff, I did mostly get back on the horse this week, but I also ate out a lot. I was being really bad, so my weight went up a little bit. Um, just 1 kilo, but I feel like I did a bad thing. So we're gonna really dial back in and try to like resist like ridiculous impulses because that's what that was just the impulse to not cook was very strong, and that's why I ate out a lot. But as for like what I do, it's still focused on weights, resistance bands, and walking. um I think I mentioned I do interval walking. uh I'm still doing that, just not as much. uh, or as much. Wait, I strength train 3 days a week, and I interval walk 2 to 3 days a week. Y'all know the same amount. Um, but I decided to actually like dedicate myself to like 8,000 steps a week. Whoops, that's sorry, that was wrong. 8,000 steps a day to try to like make sure I'm like hitting certain metrics. So even if I get up and I don't feel like interval walking, I will make sure that throughout the course of the day I hit 8,000 steps, and things like that. And so mostly, right, we're trying to like lose weight in a comfortably safe way. And the last thing I want to rant about, and this is just a quick rant, is the Japanese government has made so many changes or is making changes, and that's making it pretty difficult to like map out the future. To be fair, I have about 2 more years before I have to really think about it, or I guess 1 more year because my time is up at a certain time, i.e., 2028 at some point, and so I gotta really. I should say I'm gonna stay in Japan for the foreseeable future, but I gotta really consider, like, I guess, what I'm gonna do because permanent residency is going to be much harder to get. And I know this is not necessarily a rant, but this is something I do have to consider. Um, because, like, I know some people are like, oh, I regret coming or I regret learning Japanese. I don't regret those parts of my life. In fact, even if um, in the end I do go back to America, the mental benefits and the journey and my joy of Japanese media or enjoyment of Japanese media, I won't regret like the journey of what I did, but I think it would be a kind of disappointing ending to the journey or ending to the Japanese like life part of the journey. Because I don't think for various reasons I would give up learning Japanese. Um, although I guess people will argue there are better languages to learn, but there's always something you could do better. So I'm not terribly like, broken up about that. But I've lived my life here for quite a while. And so considering that I might have to adjust or change things is something that I might have to seriously consider in the next couple of years. And so it's not really like I don't want to get into the changes and like what they are because they're still in flux. Like I think most things will be decided fully in October. Because while probably most of the things that are floating are what will happen, they're not set in stone. And so I don't want to fearmonger is the right word, I think. Or catastrophize is probably better. I don't want to catastrophize about it. Um, I mostly want to just make it through like this year of confusion about like what am I doing and what can I do and how's this shit going down? Because basically they've taken a system that mostly made sense. Like there's some kinks and all countries have like their thing about immigration that I could rant on for forever. But basically they took a system that mostly made sense. There was some arbitrary bullshit and things like that, but you knew what you were doing, and they've now made it super confusing to where every day you wake up and wonder, is this the thing? Is that the thing? What are we doing? And so I'm hoping that by the end of this year, um, the system will be clear. Clear. Wishes are fishes. I hope the system will be clear again. Um, I think it will be a worse system than it is now. Like, I can't deny that. And I think that there's a lot in it to essentially punish people that are doing the right thing or punish people who, like, I don't know, aren't aren't the problem. Let's just put it that way. I don't know how else to put it. because they talk a lot about things that like aren't happening or aren't as bad as they'd like to pretend it is, and are addressing, not addressing, that is definitely the wrong word, but making changes and not addressing the problems that they actually have, and that's just frustrating as all get out. And so living through this kind of confusing issue has like really not stressed me out, but annoyed the absolute fuck out of me, for lack of a better term. But um as it becomes more concrete, we'll probably talk about it on Yappa Latte, so you can check that out. Should probably link Yappa Latte at some point. But overall, I think that's everything that I wanted to rant about. I'm sorry that this went to 15 minutes, but I had a lot to say. So, thank you for listening and see you next week.